So, hello everyone. I'm Alex, and I'll be giving a way-thinking mind talk today. In the Zendo, we've got Griffin, Nettie, and myself, Alex. Online, we've got my mum, Katrina, in the Blue Mountains, Margie in Canberra, Emmy in Sydney, Mavanwi in Canberra, Pam in Canberra, Rain in Brisbane, and Scott in Monterey? Yeah, okay, California. Right, so yeah, a way-seeking mind talk is basically about my practice history and some of the teachings that I found resonated with me over the years. So that's what I'll try to share today.
Can we just stop for a minute? Can we get the camera a little closer to you? Have we got that camera on yet?
We've got that one on. Yeah,
maybe Griffin, or just so that the people can see you better.
Is that a bit better?
That's a bit better. I just want them to be able to see you properly.
Okay. All right. So for some background on me before Buddhism, when I was about 11 or 12, I started struggling with anxiety and depression. And at the end of year 9, I left high school. When I was 15, I started using drugs, starting with marijuana and culminating in using heroin at the age of 17. I'm not exactly sure why this all happened and why I was having such a hard time, but I think that I was using drugs as a sort of soothing sort of behavior, but a very unhealthy one. Everything turned around when I took LSD for the first time, after which I had no interest in the drugs I'd previously been using. In case anyone doesn't know, LSD is quite different from heroin. It's like the opposite sort of feeling. Everything opens up instead of closing down. You feel more rather than feeling less, and you sort of get a sense of being very awake rather than sort of falling asleep. And when I first had LSD, I remember having a deep sense of relaxation, openness, and oneness. And I remember asking my friend, why doesn't everyone live like this? And it took me a long time to figure out what I meant by that. And so for a year or two, I kept taking LSD and going to big psychedelic parties. While the change from hard drugs to psychedelics changed a lot in my life for the positive, it was not sustainable. And I still felt like I was missing something a lot of the time. So in 2011, a few friends, including Mavanwi, told me about meditation. And so at the start of 2012, I went to a 10-day Vipassana retreat. It was incredibly difficult, probably one of the most painful things I've ever done. And so, as one does, I went back a month later for a second one. I remember being really taken aback by how much I didn't know about my experience and how little I'd known was going on. Vipassana is a very sort of physical practice, and I noticed a lot of physical sensations I had no idea were there. And I noticed that I really had no control at all over what my mind was doing, which was a bit startling at the time. It sort of felt like I'd come out of a trance that I'd been in for my whole life. And yet this was still just scratching the surface, really. So a few months after going to Vipassana, I remember I sat down and I typed into YouTube "cosmic joke," I don't know why I typed that in, but that's what I typed in, and I found a teacher by a non-dual teacher named Muji. And he was talking with a woman who was asking about her awareness. And I can't remember what she said, but his response was, "Who is watching the watcher?" And this phrase really captivated me and sort of started me on researching non-duality teachings. I started watching a lot of what they call satsangs on YouTube, which is sort of like a question and answer session with a guru type of person. And I had one-on-one instruction with a woman named Kalyani Laurie in Melbourne. I remember calling Kalyani one day because I had this sort of desperate feeling of something being missing, something was wrong. And what she told me was that I was looking for the immediacy of the present moment. I remember I looked up at the trees, which were swaying in the wind, and for a moment everything was okay. But unfortunately that didn't stick. I just sort of didn't trust that experience. And so that I continued seeking for something else. One of the practices they give you in what's called Neo-Advaita, which is the sort of non-dual tradition that I was in at the time, is self-inquiry, or asking yourself the phrase, "Who am I?" again and again and again. And while self-inquiry, I think, did loosen my sense of self, and to this date, I've never found anything that I would call a substantial self, I still didn't know what to do with that experience. I didn't feel like I could trust it. A few years later, I heard Paul Maloney Roshi say about this question, "There are no straight answers to crooked questions." And I'd have to agree with him on this. So when looking around for non-dual groups to hang out with in Canberra, I couldn't find anything. But I remember someone told me that Zen was a non-dual school, so I looked for Zen as a sort of compromise. Like, oh, sure, I'll see if that's all right. Yeah, so reading books and watching videos had sort of helped me for a while, but I really felt like I needed to be with sort of other people who were looking into sort of the nature of reality, is how I might have said it at the time. So on the 15th of May, 2013, I went to my first Zen sit with the Canberra Zen group, which was run by Jeff Ward. Jeff mentioned that there was a session coming up a month later, and I signed up without hesitation. I'm very glad that I did. The session was taught by Paul Maloney Roshi and Alan Moret Roshi, and it was in Gorrick's-Rung, which is sort of an hour or two out of Sydney in the, I don't know what that area is called. Anyway. So I found Zen intriguing, but I struggled a lot with intense pain from the sitting posture and just incredibly discursive thoughts. I sort of continued to just feel like I had no control over what was happening to me. I also had very specific ideas about what my practice was supposed to look like. And when it inevitably didn't look like that, I was quite hard on myself. This is something that I think has changed over the years. I think one of the major things is now I spend more time just noticing how things are and less time trying to make them how I think they're supposed to be. And that's really helped, I think, with me not sort of tormenting myself. I remember one thing that Paul Maloney told me at the session was that I needed to find a path with heart, and to not listen to anyone who fancied themselves a guru, which I think is quite good advice. And I found that Zen does have this heart, even if it doesn't appear to on the surface. This session had a big impact on me, and I found that Zen was something that I wanted to continue with. But it still took me a year or two to let go of the sort of non-duality scene, which I was also a part of. In late 2013, I went on retreats with Adyashanti, and then Gangaji and Eli Jackson Bear. Then in 2014, I went on a 5-week trip to California, starting with San Francisco. Whilst there, I went to the San Francisco Zen Centre a few times for meditations and talks, which was wonderful. And I also went to another Adyashanti retreat, and then while I was there, I got up in front of everyone. So at these kinds of retreats, you don't get one-on-one things, you just sort of stand up in front of everyone and have to ask a question. And what I said was, I feel like I'm wandering around looking for something, but I don't know what it is. And he said something like, what exactly is experiencing that searching? And this gave me a sense of the problem just didn't actually exist. I think I said something like, well, I guess there's no problem then. And everyone started laughing. After that retreat, I went to stay at the Sonoma Mountain Zen Centre in Santa Rosa, where I had my first real encounter with shikantaza. There was a session in the middle of the time that I was staying there, and one day I was sitting in the zendo, and I remember everything just dropped away except the sitting. And later on, I heard the head monk say in a Dharma talk, the redwoods are always sitting in shikantaza, because it is sort of surrounded by redwood trees. It's in like a forest. And I think this is an important point. I think we can learn a lot from what's right in front of us. Like the eucalyptus trees are always sitting in shikantaza. In 2014, I went on a session at the Sydney Zen Centre, and that was in December. And this was when I really felt like I started to get Zen, a little bit. It was very rainy during that session, and I had the experience of directly hearing the sound of the rain dripping down a metal gutter pipe. It was just drop, drop, blop, drop. There was no me, there was no thinking about anything. It was just direct perception of that sound. And I think that's when I started to actually understand why I'd been sitting. A car drove past and I felt like it was driving inside of me. So I'll read something that Thich Nhat Hanh wrote that reminds me of this car driving inside of me. He said, "What we're looking for is both outside and inside, and is neither outside nor inside." Outside of what? Inside of what? So it was around this time that I stopped experimenting with psychedelics. While they'd helped me for a time, it was time to let them go. And I'd like to give a warning that anyone who thinks that psychedelics will give them the same experience as they gave me, that they're wrong, because psychedelics are not reliable and not predictable. And I met plenty of people that it had an opposite effect on, who gained significant delusions because of their psychedelic use. So I just wanted to be clear about that. I also moved away from the Neo-Advaita sort of scene, and nowadays I'd be a bit critical of it in general. What they aim for is basically awakening as an end in itself, rather than in Zen where practice starts at awakening. They also tend to have a one-sided view of clinging to emptiness and denying form. And they don't have major teachings on morality. I find that Buddhism provides a more rigorous framework that I think is necessary for keeping us from falling into traps. And while the teachings go beyond concepts, the concepts do help us to navigate reality skillfully and hold us to account. So I am deeply grateful that I found the Zen path. Between 2015 and 2018, I did less formal practice. I went to a few retreats and I didn't sit regularly with a group. I just sat on and off by myself and with Mavanwi. I did lots of outside walking meditation, and I met from time to time with my teacher, Alan. And I think part of the reason why I did less formal practice was because this is when I started uni, and I had a lot of difficulty practicing and studying. I didn't know how to juggle those two. But that changed again in 2018. I went to my first retreat with Patrick Carney, who's an insight meditation teacher, which is sort of a return to the similar tradition to what I'd been in when I sat with Vipassana 5 years earlier. I found I really connected with Patrick's teaching style, and I've done several further retreats with him, and I now help him to manage online retreats, which I find very rewarding. He teaches in a tradition called the Mahasi tradition, which comes from Burma. One thing that I've gotten out of his retreats is that he allows you to practice in any of the 4 postures that the Buddha talked about. So there's a sitting, standing, walking, and lying down. So sometimes when I'm practicing by myself, if I find that the sitting is overly dull, I might stand up for an extended period of time. And I find that helps because I sort of can't drift off because I keep my eyes closed while I'm standing, so I need to be paying a lot of attention to my body, and that helps to ground me. I also find that doing sustained walking meditation can be quite, I find it quite enjoyable, and I find that I can become quite still while still moving. Also in 2018, Mavanwi became very sick, and I became her full-time carer. This has meant that I've been unable to go to a residential practice centre since then, which had been my sort of primary way of practicing before. At first this was very difficult, but I think now I see that it's helped me bring my practice into my everyday life, sort of forced me to. And I think sometimes difficulties like this can be very beneficial in ways that you don't expect. Being a carer has helped me to let go of a lot of things, especially my ideas about how things are going to go and my plan about how things are going to be in the future. There have been a lot of times when I've had a plan and at the last minute, or even in the middle of executing the plan, I've had to drop it because Mavanwi's health has changed. And I think for me that has been good medicine, because I have a tendency to get quite attached to plans, and I can be very stubborn about them. In mid-2018, I was diagnosed with autoimmune hepatitis, a rare chronic liver disease, which can be fatal if left untreated. This was pretty scary, but it took me a while to feel that fear, as I was so focused on being strong for others. While I eventually felt it, I realized, when I did eventually feel it, I realized how easily life can end. And this was terrifying, not just for me, but for everyone who cared about me. Despite this, I think it also increased my resolve to practice by reminding me that I need to live my life fully right now, not someday in the future when certain conditions are met. So that has been one benefit. Thankfully, the disease is now in remission, thanks to the medication I take. So around this time, I started practicing regularly. I started weekly Dokusan with my teacher Alan, and we started doing online retreats more. And I think this was in part due to Mavanwi and her increased resolve to practice at the time. The first few online retreats we did were actually at-home retreats. We were sort of sitting the same schedule as people who were sitting a residential retreat, but we're doing it at home, watching online, sort of listening to online Dharma talks when there was a Dharma talk scheduled, and sitting when sitting was scheduled. And we would meet with Alan maybe once a day. Mavanwi hadn't been to a retreat before, so I was also sort of being an example of how to do a retreat. So this was a lot more difficult than doing the retreats which I was used to, because I had significantly more responsibilities and a lot less support. But again, I think this difficulty has helped me to learn how to practice in my everyday life. Sort of forced me to learn how to practice in the midst of difficulties. In 2019, we started attending the Black Mountain Zen group, and 1 week Nettie attended while she was visiting Canberra briefly. And this is where we first met. And like Mavanwi, I was impressed by the way that she bowed, and I liked the way that she responded to people. So this is sort of how this started, I guess. Another night, while sitting in Zazen at the Black Mountain Zen group, I had this experience of the immediacy and simplicity of now. It's very simple and very direct, and you don't need to do anything or go anywhere special to have a direct experience of the immediacy of the present. There's no need to make it too complicated. In 2020, there were fires and there was COVID, which basically stopped us from attending in-person meditation again. But with it came lots of opportunities for online practice, which has been very helpful. I've made more connections over the last few years with people online than I think I did in all the years seeing people in person. And it's just wonderful that I'm able to now sit with people in other states and other countries on a regular basis, which we never could have done without COVID, I don't think, because no one would have made the made the leap. So I think that's a wonderful silver lining to all the difficulties that we have all faced since COVID has arrived. Last year, Nettie arrived, and we've set up the Twining Vines Zen Centre here, which has been hard work, but it's been very rewarding. It's been wonderful to be able to offer this space to people and to support their practice. I'm grateful to Nettie for allowing us to be of service and for guiding us on how to do so. Taking on roles in the Sangha has been something I'd wanted to do for a long time, and now I get to do multiple at once, which is interesting. I'm also very grateful to Mavonmi for being a good Dharma friend and partner, because without her, I don't think I would be in the same place as I am now, and I don't know if I could have done all of this by myself. So that's the end of my talk. If anyone has anything they'd like to ask or any comments, anything they'd want to share, now's the time to do so.